So this is about what the free or the uncontrolled life force brings. No? So he says all these intense things that it brings, and yet that knowledge, even that discernment which it seems to give, was a borrowed sons. The forms that came were not heaven's native births. An inner voice could speak the unreal's word. Its puissance, dangerous and absolute, could mingle poison with the wine of God. On these high shining backs, falsehood could ride. Truth lay with delight in error's passionate arms, gliding downstream in a blithe gilded barge. She edged her ray with a magnificent lie. Here in life's nether realms, all contraries meet. Truth stares and does her works with bandaged eyes, and ignorance is wisdom's patron here. Those galloping hooves in their enthusiast speed could bear to a dangerous intermediate zone where death walks wearing a robe of deathless life. Or they enter the valley of the wandering gleam, whence captives or victims of the specious ray, souls trapped in that region never can escape. Agents, not masters, they serve life's desires, toiling forever in the snare of time. Their bodies, born out of some nihil's womb, ensnare the spirit in the moment's dreams, then perish, vomiting the immortal soul out of matter's belly into the sink of naught. Yet some uncaught, unslain, can warily pass, carrying truth's image in the sheltered heart. Pluck knowledge out of error's screening grip. Break paths through the blind walls of little self. Then travel on to reach a greater life. All this streamed past her and seemed to her vision's sight as if around a high and voiceless isle, a clamor of waters from far unknown hills swallowed its narrow banks in crowding waves and made a hungry world of white, wild foam. Hastening, a dragon with 1,000,000 feet, its foam and cry a drunken giant's din, tossing a mane of darkness into God's sky. It ebbed, receding into a distant roar. Then smiled again a large and tranquil air. Blue heaven, green earth, partners of beauty's reign, lived as of old, companions in happiness, and in the world's heart laughed the joy of life. All now was still. The soil shone dry and pure. Through it all she moved not, plunged not in the vain waves. Out of the vastness of the silent self, life's clamour fled. Her spirit was mute and free. Where are we starting, Rosa? Yes.
Transient
No.
had shot the nets of doubt. Its thought of discernment seemed almost divine. Yet all that knowledge was a borrowed sense. The forms that came were not heaven's nature, but an inner voice could speak the unreal word. Its puissance, dangerous and absolute, could
Mingle.
poison with the wine of God.
So the first two lines that Rosa read, this continue to refer to that giant head of life and all that intensity that it brings. So it has something like a sword which can cut. It's a blade, trenchant, means it's very sharp, it can cut. But we don't normally use that physically for a knife. We use it in a psychological sense. That's somebody who can put things very clearly and precisely, trenchant. But the original meaning is cutting. So the way that this voice of life or this force of life speaks to us, it seems to cut through the nets of doubt. If we have a lot of enthusiasm, if we get caught in the nets of doubt, then our enthusiasm dies, no? But if that life force is strong enough, it just cuts through. It doesn't listen to those doubts. It cuts right through. And that trenchant blade of the life force cutting through doubt mimics the sword of discernment. There's this very important yogic quality of being able to discern, to see the difference, to be able to see the difference, particularly between what is true and what is false. It's called viveka, the quality of being able to distinguish the true from the false. But this discernment, it's actually such an important spiritual quality. But sometimes the life force gives us that feeling that, oh, I can tell, it's like this and it's like that. It seems almost divine. But then he says, yet all that knowledge was a borrowed sons. It's not the real thing. It is something that has been borrowed. It doesn't belong really to life, no? And the forms that it makes, were not heaven's native births. They are not the true original forms. There may be a voice which seems to come from very deep within, but it may not be telling the truth. No? An inner voice could speak with the unreal's words, not speaking the reality, something else. No? That life puissance is dangerous and absolute. It comes with an absolute conviction, no doubt about it. No? But it can mingle poison with the wine of God, the wine of delight. No? There can be something poisonous mingled in there. That's unfortunately the problem with these very strong, convincing life impulses.
So we can't always believe our inner voice. Huh?
We have to have discernment. And Mother was asked about this. How can we tell? And she said you should be able to discern the difference in quality. If it's coming from the life force, it's very strong and it's urgent and there's no doubt possible and it demands that you follow it. But that's not the voice of the soul. She says the voice of the soul is very quiet and undemanding. It's just pointing out things quietly. So if you can learn to tell that difference, and if this life force is speaking through the mind, very often it does that. It gets hold of your mind and your reason, and then it makes you absolutely sure. Yeah. So that also, then you should ask, am I really so sure? If I listen very quietly, what does my soul say? But that's difficult when we're being carried along by all this flood of life impulse. No? Martin.
On these high shining backs, falsehood would ride. Truth lay with delight in error's passionate arms, gliding downstream in a blithe, gilded barge. She edged her ray with a magnificent lie.
So the first line suggests horses. No? The horses are connected with the life energies. And these are glorious horses, very tall horses, shining. But on those horses, falsehood can ride. They look beautiful, these horses. They're strong and powerful, but be careful. It may not be the superhuman rider, may not be the truth that's riding on them.
Very sincere.
That's the test of sincerity, isn't it? Yeah. And then a completely different picture, gliding downstream on a river, a beautiful golden barge of happiness. Blithe means gladness. It's a very nice word for happiness. It suggests something carefree and innocent, pure. So that barge seems to be very pure, and it's golden, it's giving joy, but it's carrying you downstream, away from your goal, where you want to go. So in that barge, there's a line in Shakespeare's play, Antony and Cleopatra, where he describes Queen Cleopatra on the Nile in her gilded barge, with her lover Antony, so from Rome. So here he reminds us a little bit of that. He says, truth lay with delight in error's passionate arms, as if she's in love, or the error has carried her away, and there she is, gliding very smoothly, being carried downstream in her beautiful barge. Truth has her ray, her light that lights things up, but she edges her light. There's some dark shadow to it, with a magnificent lie, a falsehood. Wonderful poetic way of telling very profound things.
Not an easy task.
Here in life's nether realms, all contraries meet. Truth stares and does her works with bandaged eyes, and ignorance is wisdom's pattern here. Those galloping hooves in their enthusiast speed could bear to dangerous intermediate zone, where death walks wearing a robe of deathless light.
Yes. So here in our world, in life's nether realms, these lower levels of life, all the opposites, all contraries come together. Truth with error, light with darkness. And here, in these nether realms, truth stares. It's difficult for her to see. And it's as if she's got a blindfold on. She does her works with bandaged eyes. There's some unconsciousness preventing her from seeing clearly. And ignorance is wisdom's patron here. We are dominated by ignorance, and ignorance may be looking for wisdom. You know, a patron is somebody who supports. We have patrons for Savitri Bhavan. An artist may have patrons who support him, who buy his works or help him to buy materials and so on. So who is the master? It's the ignorance who is the master, who's paying or supporting wisdom here. And then again he brings back these horses, these high shining backs. They have galloping hooves. They carry you off very fast in their enthusiast speed. They're full of enthusiasm, rushing off somewhere. No? But they can be carrying you off into this dangerous intermediate zone. It's dangerous because death, not just the death of the body, but the death of the soul, walks wearing a robe of deathless life. He's disguised as immortal, higher form of life. No. I don't know whether I should try to, I think I don't try to say something about this dangerous intermediate zone. It's somewhere between this material world and the true subtle worlds. There's a dangerous zone where things are very, very mixed, and you have the feeling that, oh, these are lights of truth, but they may be very misleading. And he's going to tell us what a dangerous place it is. It comes in the next sentence. Please, Sergei.
Or they enter the valley, or the wandering gleams, lands, captives, or victims of the specious ray. Souls trapped in that region never can escape.
So, this dangerous intermediate zone and this valley of the wandering gleam, they're very closely connected. A gleam is a soft light, no? But it's moving around. It's not a steady light. You can't really take your bearings according to that light. It's always shifting, always moving around. And if you follow after that light, you get stuck. The soul can get trapped in that region. And if it really gets trapped there, he says it can't ever escape. You want to ask something, Sergei?
This region belongs to Asuric forces or something, Rakshas forces.
I don't want to say Asuric, but I would like to say illusory. This is something unreal, but it can be very attractive, that unreal world. I have known some people who got trapped there. I hope one day they will escape. That they begin to have inner experiences, and perhaps there's some ambition, or they are just not very, very clear in their minds, and they get stuck there, and they follow that wandering gleam, and they're thinking that they're having wonderful experiences, but actually they are just lost. It's very painful to see and to know that that can happen. They become captives. They get caught there, or victims. They even buy, yeah. But this specious ray, it's a ray of light, it's a gleam, but it's false. It's pretending, it's illusory. And of course he says they never can escape, but I'm sure they can escape by grace. But at least you're stuck there until somebody comes and rescues you. Ella.
Agents, not masters, they serve life desires, toiling forever in the snare of time.
You can read the next sentence too.
The body is born out of some nihils, whom ensnare the spirit in the moment's dreams, then perish, vomiting the immortal soul out of matter's belly into the sink or knot.
Yes. So those beings who are trapped in that region, the soul is supposed to be a master, but they are not masters anymore. They are agents. They're acting on behalf of the life force. No? They serve life's desires, and they're like slaves, toiling forever, caught in the snare of time. They can't get free of this. A snare is a kind of trap we put. It's made of a wire or a string. The animal puts its foot in, and then the snare catches. It can't get free. So they are caught in this cycle of endless time. They have bodies, but those bodies are born out of some nihil's womb. They don't have the divine presence in them. They are born out of some nothingness. So those bodies, they're carrying the spirit within. They snare it, ensnare it. They catch it in the dreams of the moment, in those illusory appearances, those shifting visions, no? And then the bodies perish, and the immortal soul is vomited out of the belly of matter it's been in there, into the sink of naught. If we're vomiting, we want to vomit into the drain, don't we? Of nothingness. They just get lost. Terrible. So let us all try to avoid that dangerous intermediate zone and the valley of the wandering gleam. Joel.
Yet some uncaught, unslain, can warm past, carrying truth image in the sheltered heart. Pluck knowledge out of error's screaming blip, break path through the blind walls of little self, then travel on to reach a greater life.
Yes. So it is possible to escape. Some don't get caught, they don't get destroyed. They can pass, if they pass warily, carefully, yeah? Carrying truth's image. If they have within their hearts some image of the true light kept sheltered there, then carefully they can pass. And they can even get some true knowledge out of that grip of error, of falsehood. And they can break paths through the blind walls of little self. One reason for getting trapped in that place is that you are selfish. Yeah? Yeah. But if you have an image of the truth, and you can break through those blind walls of little self, and then you'll be able to travel on to greater life, and you'll be carrying that knowledge that you've plucked out of the grip of error. Carry it with you. Gumsun.
All this streamed past her, and seemed to her vision's sight, as if along the high and voiceless
Isle.
aisle,
The S is silent.
a clamor over waters from far unknown hills, swallowed its narrow banks in crowding waves, and made a hungry world of white, wide foam.
Yeah, let's pause there. So the first image for this life force coming was like a flood, no? As if in the desert, suddenly somewhere there's been some rain, and without warning, a huge mass of water comes. So now he returns to that image. All this flood of life impulses streamed past her, and to her inner vision sight, she feels as if she's on a high, silent island. Isle, it's a poetic word for an island. And as in island, the S is silent. It's a high, tall isle, so it doesn't get flooded, and it's voiceless, it's silent. That's how she feels, lifted up, and this flood is passing. And all around the island, there's this noise, a clamor, a loud noise of waters rushing from far unknown hills. And they spread, they swallow up the narrow banks. There must be a kind of stream or river there, but now all this water has come from those faraway hills, and it's completely overflowed the banks. And everywhere the Hodmedza makes a hungry world of white, wild foam on the top of water that's moving very fast. There's bubbles, no? Yeah. And it's fierce, it's eating things up, this stream. And he continues to describe that. Renana, will you read? Hastening. Also the T is, we slur it over a little bit. Hastening.
Hastening, a dragon with millions fits its hum and cry, and drunken giant tossing and
Main, yeah.
mane of darkness into a broad sky. Its id recording into a distant road.
Yes. So he says this flood, this sort of rush of water, it's like a dragon, something very fierce and powerful. And this dragon doesn't just have 4 feet or 6 feet or 10 feet. It's one of these Chinese dragons with many, many feet, 1,000,000 feet. And this bubbling and rush and the noise, it's like the noise, all the clamor and noise made by a drunken giant. Somebody who's huge, who's out of control, crashing around. And this dragon has a mane like a horse or like a lion. But it's a mane of darkness, a cloud of darkness. No? As it moves, this mane is darkness is moving with it, tossing it towards the beautiful, clear sky of God above. And gradually it ebbed. This is something that the sea does, that the sea goes away and then it comes back again. It ebbs and it flows. There's high tide and then there's the ebb tide when it goes away and far out, and then it starts to come back again. So that flood ebbed, all the water went away, there's nothing left. Further and further, as it goes further away, that roar, that huge noise it's been making gets less. A distant roar, it's going off into the distance. So the flood is over, past. Mahalingam.
Then smiled again the Lord in tranquil air. Blue, green air, partners of beauty's reign. Lived as of old, companions in happiness. And in the world, heart laughed the joy of life.
Yes, so when it has passed, then there's all the natural joy of life that is natural to earth somehow. No? Then there's a large, peaceful sun smiling. No? There's the blue sky, there's the green earth, and the blue sky and the sun and the green earth, they are partners. They join together in this reign of beauty. They live together as of old, as companions in happiness. That's how it should be. Tranquil sun, blue heaven, green earth, in harmony, no? And under the rule of beauty. And Savitri feels in the heart of the world the laughter of the sweet, natural joy of life, the delight that should be there in life. Uma.
How these two things are connected. Before it was saying it was rushing and coming,
Yeah.
then suddenly this changes. How these two can be connected?
Well, perhaps it is a dam that has broken, or perhaps it's caused by a heavy shower of rain in the hills, and then it all comes, but then it's finished. It's gone. No? And everything's back to normal. There's no more noise. There's no more cloud of darkness. It's just as it should be. So this is the psychological experience of Savitri. There she is as if she's on her little island, silent island, but there's this huge flood, but then it's gone. No? And things are back the way they should be. You know. She's in her natural state again. No?
All now was still, the soil shone dry and pure. No it all she made for flood not in the rain waves. Out of the vastness of the silent self, life's glamour fleet, her spirit was neat and free.
Yes. So now there's no more rush of flood, everything is quiet. And the soil begins to dry. You know? The soil shone pure and dry. There's no mud even. Nothing has been left behind by that flood. But through that whole time of the flood, she didn't move. And she didn't get carried away by those waves. She didn't plunge into those vain waves, those useless waves. Sometimes it's nice to plunge into waves, but it's not advisable if they are vital waves. So she feels again the vastness of the silent self, and all that noise, that clamor of life has fled, it has run away, and her spirit feels silent, mute, and free. There's no danger anymore. Everything becomes peaceful because she's been able to hold her ground and keep herself aloof from all that flood of vital force which was trying to carry her away. We can go a bit further. Ganga Lakshmi.
Then, journeying forever forward through the self-wide hush, she came into a brilliant ordered space. Their life dwelt parked in an armed tranquility. The chain was on her strong, insurgent heart.
So this is another kind of psychological state that Savitri becomes aware of as she moves into the depths of her being. She's moving forward through this wide hush, this high silence of her vast self, and she comes into a space which is full of light, it's brilliant, and it's orderly. Life is usually not orderly. No? Order comes with mind, actually, starts to come. So in this space that she has come, life is living there, but she's parked. This is something that you do with your car, of course, nowadays. But I think if we go back to the original meaning of the word, it means in a park, in an enclosed garden. And this park is tranquil, it's peaceful, but it's only peaceful because it's protected. Somebody is there with weapons protecting that calm, beautiful space. And she is not allowed to move freely. A chain is on her strong, insurgent heart. It's as if she's an animal who's been kept there, maybe even chained up, not allowed to move freely. Bhuvana.
Tamed to the modesty of a measured pace, she kept no more her vehement stride and rush. She had lost the careless majesty of her mule and the ample grandeur of her regal form. Curved were her mighty palms, her splendid waist, sobered the revels of her
Bacchant
play. Cut down were her spanderings in desire's bazaar. Quiesced her despot will, her fancies dance, echoed stolidity, born the riot of sense.
Yes. So here, this is life as the life goddess, no? Now she's been tamed, she's not wild. Somebody has tamed her. It's what you do to a wild animal.
No, tamed.
T-A-M-E-D.
Yeah.
Tamed. Yeah. Apprivoisé.
Apprivoisé.
Yeah, Children sometimes they feed squirrels and the squirrels become tame, or the mongoose or whatever. So something that's naturally wild, you teach it to be tame. Also horses, no? You can catch wild horses and you can train them. So then they're not allowed to gallop freely and rush off and carry you off with them. They have to calm down. But when he uses the word modesty, it suggests a young woman. She's no longer allowed to run freely like when she was a wild little thing. Now she's a young woman. She has to walk in a special way and, not look around too much. A measured pace. Yes, like it's typical, but it was always like that with princesses and so on, no? Where perhaps they were small, they were allowed to move freely. But then very soon they had to start learning to keep a measured, modest pace, no? She's not allowed to do this vehement stride and rushing about anymore. Vehement, it's full of energy. So in this way, she's kind of been restrained, made captive. So she's lost the careless majesty of her muse. Life in her, we can say in her divine state, she's like a queen. No? And she has very queenly dreams and thoughts, but they are untamed, careless. Now she can't afford that. No? Her mighty pomps, an empress will have a big retinue and all kinds of gorgeous things around her, but this has now been curbed. Again, this is something you do to a horse. If you put reins on a horse and a bit, you can hold it back to curb it, to prevent it from moving. So all that free movement and extravagance, her splendid waist, she used to spread all her riches freely, no? She used to enjoy revels, parties, wild parties of her bacchant play. The bacchants are the female worshippers of the Greek god of wine, Dionysus. And they get drunk on the intoxicating divine wine, and they worship their god, dancing wildly in circles around him. No? All this gets sobered down. Sober means to make modest and quiet and not extravagant. No? Those revels, she can't indulge in that anymore. And she used to go shopping, squandering, spending all her money in fancies, in Desires Bazaar. She could have anything that she wanted. But now somebody has come and given her a budget, and her squanderings, she's not allowed to waste things like that anymore. She used to have a very despotic will, no? Like young girls sometimes do, that everybody has to do exactly what I say. No? And especially if you're a queen, it's like that. A despot is an absolute ruler. But now that absolute ruler of her will is coerced, it's forced to obey somebody else. And her fanciful dance, and even the sense experiences. It's an important part of life, no? All our sense feelings and enjoyment, the senses, and life brings us often a kind of delight in all the sense experiences. But this has now been tied up, a cold stolidity, not taking delight in the senses. Stolidity actually means somebody who's very dull and inert and doesn't respond. So all that fine, sensitive enjoyment of all the possibilities of the senses, this has all been turned very cold and insensitive. So she's a queen still, but she's not free. A royalty without freedom was her lot. This is the lot now of the life goddess as Savitri perceives it in this new realm that she's moved into, where the life begins to be under the control of mind.
These are about Savitri or
This is what Savitri is seeing, and she's seeing life now not in this wild, flooding, free state, but controlled, parked, coerced, not allowed to move freely. She has to move within bounds. And we'll see when we go on that these bounds are set by the mind. Whose turn next? Suresh? Yes.
Royalty without freedom was her lot. The sovereign throne obeyed her ministers. Her servants' mind and sense governed her house. Her spirits bound they cast in
Rigid.
rigid lines, or guarding with their
This is worse. This is phalanx. Phalanx.
phalanx of armor rules. The recent balanced region
Rain.
kept order and peace.
Yes. So she's a queen, but she doesn't have freedom. In fact, she does what her ministers tell her. The sovereign throned life is there on her throne. She's the queen, but she has to do what her advisors tell her. Her servants, the mind and the senses, they are governing her house. And together they set rigid lines limiting her spirit, her free spirit. And they guard those rigid lines with a phalanx. A phalanx is a unit in the army. I don't know how many people it is, but warriors. Yeah? So these are not actual warriors. These are rules that are set there like guardians, warriors. Armored rules. They have weapons. So these bounds and these warriors are set there by the reason. The reason rules in a balanced way. It keeps order and peace. It doesn't allow life to play freely, and it doesn't allow this indulgence in sense experiences and all that. It keeps the life goddess parked in armed tranquility. Of course, this is something that we have to learn to do as we grow up, but it is a kind of limitation. One more sentence, Dhanalakshmi.
Her will lived closed in adamant walls of law. Coerced was her force by chains that feigned to adorn. Imagination was present in a fort. Her wanton and licentious favorite.
I think we'd better pause there. Yeah. So the will of life, live closed, like in a castle, closed in adamant walls, very, very strong walls of law. And her force is coerced. It's forced to do things by chains. They put chains on her. These chains, they say, oh, they're beautiful ornaments. Life looks so beautiful, decorated in these chains, but they don't allow her to move freely. No? They pretended, these chains pretended to adorn. And her favorite, life's favorite, the one that she loves best, her best friend or her lover, imagination. He gets put in prison. No? Because he's not disciplined enough. He's wanton and licentious. He's addicted to pleasure and he's careless. He's not serious. So, although she's the queen, her favorite is put in prison.
Wanton means?
Wanton, it means pleasure-loving, unreliable, faithless. So that's quite a picture, isn't it? I think we'll go back to where we started. We'll read from line 210. Or we'll start from 208, a trenchant blade.
A trenchant blade that shore the nets of doubt, its sword of discernment seemed almost divine. Yet all that knowledge was a borrowed son's. The forms that came were not heaven's native birth. An inner voice could speak the unreal's word. Its puissance, dangerous and absolute, could mingle poison with the wine of God. On these high shining backs falsehood could ride. Truth lay with delight in error's passionate arms, gliding downstream in a blithe gilded barge. She edged her ray with a magnificent lie. Here, in life's nether realms, all contraries meet. Truth stares and does her works with bandaged eyes, and ignorance is wisdom's patron here. Those galloping hooves in their enthusiast speed could bear to a dangerous intermediate zone where death walks wearing a robe of deathless life. Or they enter the valley of the wandering gleam, whence captives or victims of the specious ray, souls trapped in that region never can escape. Agents, not masters, they serve life's desires, toiling forever in the snare of time. Their bodies, born out of some nihil's womb, ensnare the spirit in the moment's dreams, then perish, vomiting the immortal soul out of matter's belly into the sink of naught. Yet some uncaught, unslain, can warily pass, carrying truth's image in the sheltered heart. Pluck knowledge out of error's screening grip, break paths through the blind walls of little self, then travel on to reach a greater life. All this streamed past her and seemed to her vision's sight as if around a high and voiceless isle a clamour of waters from far unknown hills swallowed its narrow banks in crowding waves and made a hungry world of white wild foam. Hastening, a dragon with 1,000,000 feet, its foam and cry a drunken giant's din, tossing a mane of darkness into God's sky. It ebbed, receding into a distant roar. Then smiled again a large and tranquil air. Blue heaven, green earth, partners of beauty's reign, lived as of old, companions in happiness. And in the world's heart laughed the joy of life. All now was still. The soil shone dry and pure. Through it all she moved not, plunged not in the vain waves. Out of the vastness of the silent self, life's clamour fled. Her spirit was mute and free. Then, journeying forward through the self's wide hush, she came into a brilliant, ordered space. There life dwelt parked in an armed tranquility. A chain was on her strong, insurgent heart. Tamed to the modesty of a measured pace, she kept no more her vehement stride and rush. She had lost the careless majesty of her muse and the ample grandeur of her regal force. Curbed were her mighty pomps, her splendid waist. Sobered the revels of her bacchant play. Cut down were her squanderings in desire's bazaar. Coerced her despot will, her fancy's dance. A cold stolidity bound the riot of sense. A royalty without freedom was her lot. The sovereign throned obeyed her ministers. Her servants, mind and sense, governed her house. Her spirit's bounds they cast in rigid lines, and guarding with a phalanx of armoured rules the reason's balanced reign, kept order and peace. Her will lived closed in adamant walls of law. Coerced was her force by chains that feigned to adorn. Imagination was prisoned in a fort, her wanton and licentious favourite.